Fought over 150 years ago, the American Civil War still captures the imaginations of people everywhere. The Civil War was the bloodiest war in America's history. In fact, more Americans died in the Civil War than every other war combined. What would cause America to go to war with itself? In order to better understand the causes of the Civil War, we first need to examine the differences between North and South. There are four major issues that divided North and South on the eve of the Civil War. Let's take a look at them one at a time. So, first of all, we have slavery. The North was generally opposed or against anti slavery, whereas the South supported slavery. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Not all Northerners were abolitionists. Some were. Some wanted to end slavery completely. Others just wanted to stop the spread of slavery. Others maybe personally wouldn't own slaves themselves, but they weren't necessarily opposed to others owning slaves. In the South, not everybody owned slaves. There were some plantation owners who owned many slaves, some plantations even hundreds. Other people maybe had a few slaves, and many Southerners did not own any slaves at all, yet they still supported the institution of slavery. So it does get a little bit more complicated than one would at first think. Let's look at a couple broadsides and kind of delve into this a little bit more. So a broadside would be something like a billboard that you would see today, or maybe these would be printed in a newspaper. And the first one underneath the north column is cautioning African Americans in Boston, warning them that they could be kidnapped, they could be forced into slavery. You see the words kidnappers and slave catchers. So what we have going on here, if a slave were to run away from the South, they would try to make it to Canada on the Underground Railroad to gain their freedom. Before you get to Canada, you would spend some time in northern states. Southern states wanted Northerners to return those runaway slaves. Many Northerners were reluctant to turn in another human being for them to be forced into slavery. So these two broadsides kind of show you the difference. We have the reward being offered by a Southern plantation owner, and then in the North, the reluctance to turn those people in. So continuing on, let's talk about the cultural differences between North and South. Culture refers to one's way of life. Some pictures here to kind of show the difference. So in the North, we have lots of cities and factories, lots of people. This picture here on the left is New York City in 1850. We can see lots of houses and factories and industry and lots of people. Contrast that with the South. Life in the South was very rural. It was very agricultural. You have large farms and plantations, many enslaved African Americans, but not nearly as many large cities. So to summarize on our chart here, we can say that the North is urban. It was lots of cities and factories, whereas the South was agricultural. It had lots of rural farms. And the different way of life kind of supports those views on slavery. If there are a lot of cities and factories, there is no need for slave labor, whereas if you have these big farms, you need lots of people to work on the farms, and so that lends itself in support of slavery. Continuing on, let's get into some economic reasons. So when we talk about economics, we're talking about things like jobs and money and certain laws that would be passed that would support those things. So we can put a dollar sign there. As far as economics goes, the North favored tariffs, whereas the South was against tariffs. They opposed tariffs. So what does this word tariff mean? Let's look at this tariff issue a little bit more closely. What is a tariff? A tariff is a tax on foreign goods. Now, what does that mean exactly? The effect of a tariff is that it causes foreign goods to become more expensive. So prior to the Civil War, Great Britain could make cloth very cheaply. Cloth, essential for clothes and dresses and things like that. Great Britain had the Industrial Revolution happen first, so they were able to make things more cheaply. So let's say that Great Britain could make their cloth for $2. Okay? Whereas the United States, having built the factories later on, it's a little bit more expensive for them to manufacture things. The United States costs $4 to make cloth. Now, these numbers aren't 100% accurate. They're really just to kind of demonstrate what a tariff is. So, if you live in the United States, you could buy your American-made cloth for $4, or you could buy cloth from Great Britain for half the cost. It's a no-brainer, right? Great Britain is going to be selling a lot of cloth to the United States because it's cheaper. In addition to that, all the southern states that are growing cotton, England can then, after they sell their goods in America, they can get that southern cotton, bring it right back to their factories. So this works great for the South, this works great for Great Britain, but not so much for the northern factories. So what northern business owners want is they want to place a tariff on that British cloth. They want to put a tax on it. So if we add a tariff here, we're going to tell England basically, hold on a second, you cannot sell your cloth for cheaper than our northern factories can make it. So we're going to place a tariff. We're going to place a tax on that foreign cloth. And let's say that the tariff is $3. So now all of a sudden, British cloth is no longer costing $2. It's $2 originally, plus that $3 tax. So now if you want to buy the British cloth, you have to pay $5. This kind of shifts things around. American-made cloth is now cheaper than the British-made cloth. So northern factories supported the tariff. They were very much in favor of this because it made the goods that they were selling preferable because it was now the cheapest thing out there. The South, on the other hand, they didn't like the tariff so much. First of all, it made the things that they were buying more expensive. Another drawback to the tariff, Southerners were afraid that if we placed a tariff on British cloth, then the British factories would not come to the South to buy their cotton, that they would go elsewhere. So we have one final issue to look at, and that is a constitutional issue. In other words, how do we interpret the Constitution? And if laws are made, how do those laws get enforced? The North believed in a strong national government, whereas the South believed in states' rights. So in order to understand this a little bit more, let's look at some quotes from a Northerner and a Southerner and talk about the differences. So first of all, we have Abraham Lincoln, during his inauguration as president, says the following: "To the extent of my ability, I shall take care, as the Constitution itself expressly enjoins upon me, that the laws of the Union be faithfully executed in all the states." So what does this mean exactly? What is Lincoln trying to get at here? The key really is that the laws are carried out in all of the states. So let's say that the national government passes a law to end slavery. Remember, the North had more people because of all those cities, so they had more control in Congress. According to Lincoln and according to many Northerners, if the national government passes a law, all states must follow that law. It doesn't matter if they like it or not. So the North wanted a strong national government that could tell the South what to do. Southerners, on the other hand, supported states' rights. So here we have Robert E. Lee giving a message to Maryland in 1862. "The people of the Confederate States have long watched with the deepest sympathy the wrongs and outrages that have been inflicted under the pretense of supporting the Constitution." So here Lee is saying to Southerners that the national government is not listening to them, not meeting their needs, and so therefore the southern states don't need to do what the national government says. If the government violates their rights as they feel, then they can just ignore that law. So the South and the North had very different interpretations of the Constitution. Northerners wanted a strong federal government. Southerners supported states' rights. To conclude, there were four major differences that divided the North and the South. Northerners were opposed to slavery largely because they really had no need for slave labor with the factories and cities that existed in the North, whereas the South supported slave labor and they needed slaves to work on the large plantations and farms. This also led to a difference in opinion over tariffs. Tariffs helped factories, so Northerners supported the tariffs, whereas Southerners opposed that extra tax on foreign goods because it made the things that they were buying more expensive. And then finally, the difference in the Constitution. Northerners believed in a strong national government that could tell the states what to do, whereas Southerners felt that the states should be the ones making the decision.